What's going on, guys? Your host, George Mackay, back again with another amazing interview. I'm excited to bring this man to the show. He's a paisan, if you will, of mine, because I am half Italian myself. And that right there gives you your hint if you don't know who I'm talking about. But let's welcome him to Straight Talk Wrestling right now, Alessandro del Bruno. How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. How was I on the Italian accent? Did it work? Like the Alessandro? Did I get
perfect.
it right?
I couldn't tell you were half. I thought you were full.
My other half is Scottish. I know.
Oh.
It's a crazy mix. My dad's Scottish. My mom's Italian. She's from southern Italy, Bari.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
She's Baresi.
Not a lot of people from there.
Yeah, what part of Italy is your family from?
My mom is Fujian, so she's from Foggia, and my dad is from Sicily in small town Monteperto.
Oh, Sicilian. I love it.
Yes.
All right, so Alessandro, one of the standard questions I always ask everybody that I interview on the show, if you've ever listened, you would know it as well. I call it the defining moment. It's the moment where you fell in love with this business we're going to be talking about today.
Right. I love that. And that's the first question.
Yeah.
The first question, my answer to that, the defining moment. Oh, man. It's going to have to be, I mean, when growing up, I was brought into wrestling through my brother. He showed me what it was, made me watch it. But I think the defining moment was Shawn Michaels versus Vader. That was the moment that I was absolutely hooked on professional wrestling. That match alone made me just think of a million different things and a million different emotions, and potentially one day being able to be a wrestler was in my head from that very moment.
That is a crazy moment. I've heard a lot of people mention Shawn Michaels, but you're mentioning like Shawn Michaels versus Vader. I mean, that's like one of the smallest guys in the business next to Rey Mysterio, versus like back in the time, the early '90s. He was a behemoth. He was almost the Andre the Giant of the '90s.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what it was for me, right? Like Shawn was clearly my favorite, but I think like when I saw that match, I realized like the smallest guy versus the biggest guy was a thing. David versus Goliath angle that they worked, and how that played out was a defining moment for me.
I love the answer, and I think that's an absolute great defining moment. So I want to talk. I'm going to kind of steam off a little bit here, but the character.
Yeah, no worries.
The character. It's you come out in the soccer gear, and you come out to 90s dance music, and it's I love it. No, I really do love it. I mean, that reminds me of my childhood. I mean, I wasn't so much a Gino, if you will, Bambino, but I definitely listened to the dance music in the 90s. I think everybody did. But it is especially cool with the soccer stuff, because a lot of Italian wrestlers, when you do see them or when they have their gimmicks, other than Bruno Sammartino, who is just like the king of Italian wrestling, if you will, other than him, whenever I see an Italian wrestler, even somebody coming up, or if I see somebody on TV that has a little Italian in them, they automatically go right to the mafia aspect of the character. Whereas you've designed your character all around this just, Italian guy who loves soccer, and you implement a lot of soccer moves in your repertoire, which I absolutely love, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But tell me about the character evolution. Like, where did you come up with everything that you're doing now?
Well, character evolution, I mean, you spoke upon it a little bit, but I think, getting into wrestling, everyone's goal when they first start out is like, how can you be the most badass wrestler? And giving yourself this cool name and, with no gimmick, just trying to be really cool is the best thing you can do when you're first starting out. So that happened to me. I was Alex York. I thought that was what I was going to be for the rest of my wrestling career. Then I quickly learned that wasn't the best idea and best marketing tool for me. Everyone would say, the best version of yourself is, you, but turned up. And I just kind of really dived into who I am and what I love. And soccer's been prominent throughout my whole life, and the Italian culture and being a soccer fan from a very young age, obviously, and playing throughout my entire life, I thought that was a perfect fit. So then I started creating the character and how that would work, and and it kind of worked perfectly because at the time I was even smaller than I was now, if you can imagine. And I realized that worked in a land full of giants. Soccer players aren't naturally big guys. They're skinny and they're athletic. They're fast. They're quick, and that all worked in my favor. So I really started to begin the evolution in that sense, and then I started adding the move set and what I can call these moves and how I could use my feet rather than power moves, and that's the evolution of it all.
That's incredible. I had the pleasure of seeing you at a crossbody event where you took on Aiden Prince. Aiden Prince,
Yep.
I'm a huge fan. He's actually been on the show before. He's he's actually become one of my closest friends. And that match between you and him, that match sold the show for me that night. Other than the Cody Deaner and Psycho Mike match, which was just completely hilarious. But
Right.
Your guys' match that night, man. I mean, Aiden Prince is another level. But when he was in the ring with you that night, I saw him kick it into a completely different gear. And I think that credit goes to you. Because your guy, like, when you kicked him, dude, there's one point in the middle of the ring where you kicked him. It was like a high kick to the chest. It was almost like a chop, but you did it with your shin. And when you kicked him, in my seat, I squirmed. I was sitting second row, center ring. I squirmed, and I brought my friend with me, one of my former co-hosts, Michelle. I used to call her the voice. She was the voice of reason on the early days of Straight Talk Wrestling. But I looked at her, I said, Michelle, my balls just went into my throat because you kicked him so hard that everything shrank and everything hurts. Everything hurts now.
Yeah.
Like, I could feel the pain in my chest. And I remember seeing him after. He had this red mark across his chest. I'm like, dude, he's like, I know, right? It killed. But, like, I got to tell you, man, your kicks are no joke. And that obviously comes from the soccer side of things. So did you play soccer when you were a kid as well?
I played when I was a kid, I played for 10 years. And then once I started getting into wrestling and wrestling training and then wrestling every weekend, obviously independently, I couldn't do the schedule anymore and wrestling took over for me. And I was fine with that. I knew that I was unfortunately not as talented as I wish I was in soccer, and moving on to different levels is a lot harder than people think. So wrestling took over. My passion for wrestling was obviously unmatched. So I played for 10 years, yeah.
And then let me ask you a question about, because family, this is huge for me because I'm a wrestling fan, and my mom being from Italy, she was always like, oh, this is so stupid, they wrestle around in their underwear, and it's the only sport where people who wrestle around in their underwear fight for a belt. And that's how she used to tell me. She goes, they fight for a belt, they can't even hold their pants up. I go, Mom, it's not underwear, it's like, no, it's stupid, it's Finocchio, she used to say, it's Finocchio. So okay, Mom, I'm not going to get it, but my dad and we bonded over it, and obviously he fell out of it, but I still flourished with it. So when you went to Mom and Dad, because I want to be a fly on the wall, I want to set the scene. You went to Mom and Dad, maybe you were eating dinner one night at the house, maybe a good plate of pasta, maybe some fresh antipasto, you got your focaccia cheese, your prosciutto, you probably had your breads and all that stuff, and you sit down, your glass of wine, maybe you were just younger, so maybe juice, and they had their wine, and you looked over and you said, Mom, Dad, I love you guys, but I want to be a professional wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing with my parents is, they're totally, like you're saying, authentic Italian, but I think for them, growing up and watching my older brother kind of go in any direction that he kind of wanted, they kind of were okay with it for me, because they realized my brother was already exposing me to wrestling for the last 5 years as a child, right? So when I came around my 15th birthday and I had mentioned it to them, like you're saying, they were just like, they were not into it, like you're saying, but they said, if you want to go to wrestling training, you can pay for it yourself when you get your first job. So I made it a mission of mine to get a job and to pay for my own training. And then once that happened, they kind of realized how serious I was about it, and they support it. But my dad's only been to a few. My mom's been to probably 2. But they're not as big as critics as as my completely foreign grandparents who just don't even understand the concept of why I would ever do such a thing to myself. They still think it's terrible, but
yeah, but they probably see it as you going into a ring and just getting, beating
hurt.
Yeah, getting hurt. Why would you put yourself through that? They probably say, and you're like, well, it's not really. Yes, I do get hurt. I take risks, but there's a story here. There's no story. He hits you, you hit him. Somebody pins somebody. 1, 2, 3. That's the story.
Yeah.
No, there is more to it than that. There is
100%, 100%. But trying to tell my grandparents that. It's hard to get through to them. Easier my parents.
Well, that's great that you have that support system, and it's good that your brother, I guess, kind of broke the mold, because by the time you came around, they were like, okay, well, his brother's already doing crazy stuff, so this is the normal.
Exactly. It was great.
So then we should thank your brother for bringing you into our lives. Okay, so let's shout him out. What's his name?
Anthony Bruno.
Anthony Bruno. Thank you, Anthony, for exposing Alessandro to wrestling, because without that, I wouldn't be talking to him today.
Oh yeah, man. He's the biggest proponent. Honestly, he would force my parents. He's 5 years older than me. So when I was around 13 or 14, what we would do, he would force my parents out. So he would be 20 at the time. He would force my parents out of the house on weekends on a Sunday when a WWE pay-per-view would be on. And then right before the pay-per-view, around 7, say it started at 7, at 5:30 we would invite all the guys that are coming to watch the pay-per-view over early. We would transform my living room into a wrestling ring, and we would put on mini shows. Just me and my brother and my cousin for our buddies and the friends who are coming to watch the pay-per-view at night. We called that Extreme Living Room Wrestling, and that was the birth of me really wanting to start training and actually wrestling.
Well, good for him. Thank you again, Anthony. So when you got your first job and you got your first paycheck and you were able to afford the wrestling training, who did you start training with, and where did you start training?
So there was a school that was open at the time in Hamilton here. It was called Living Legends Wrestling Academy, and that was run by a gentleman named Ricky Stardust and, more importantly, Ernie Moore, who was in WWF for a small stretch. So a lot of the training could be definitely done by him on Saturdays and Thursday nights. Ricky was more on the business side. He's basically a guy who's had some local clout to him, and he was more on the business side. But Ernie was doing the training, and so I went there when I was 15 or 16 when I got my first job, and just kind of learned the ropes.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. So you tell me about, because I'm always intrigued, because I've never myself stepped into a ring and I've never done any of the training. I want to do something in the near future where I can get maybe a ring for an hour and do something for my YouTube page. Maybe that's something for that's something for the new year for sure.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, maybe you could be the one who takes me in the ring and.
Ooh, I like that.
All right, then we're gonna have to set that up in the new year. So
there you go.
How was the first bump like? Because everyone has a different answer for this question. So when you were taking your first bump, and as a human being, you're not trained to fall backwards. You're actually trained to try to catch yourself, trained to try to balance yourself. But in wrestling, you have to completely untrain everything you've ever known. Because you have to learn how to fall back. You have to learn how to roll out of things. You have to learn how to be safe, above all, by putting on a kick-ass show. So what was your thoughts, or what was your first reaction to that first bump that you took?
It was a little scary. Like I was saying to you, and just doing those little shows in my living room or just bumping on a bed, it's just not the same when you're in a ring. I mean, you could try it a million times on your bed and do it perfectly, but when you're in a ring, it's a different animal. And I remember taking that bump the first time. Obviously, it was a lot harder than I thought it was, because I was 120 pounds soaking wet, so I don't move a spring in the slightest. So the ring didn't move. The boards didn't move. Everything hurt. But one of the biggest things is you gotta, and I didn't obviously realize, is it's the whiplash of the bump that is the scariest part for me. a lot of guys are bigger and they have bigger shoulders, broader shoulders, so their heads, if they tuck a little bit, they can obviously make sure that they don't come close to smashing the back of their head on the mat. But, with a smaller frame, and as I was at whatever 120 pounds that I was, that whiplash effect, if you're not careful, could come back and haunt you with a nice little concussion. So it was a scary first bump for me in that ring, and I learned very quickly that I needed to slow down and take those bumps nice and slow.
Which you obviously do, but as I spoke about, one of the things that I think we can accredit to soccer, all those years you played, is your speed.
Sure.
Your leg strength is astronomical. It's incredible. But also, you know what? I will say this, and you may not agree with me, but I don't care. It's my show, so I'm going to say it anyways. I think your power is very underestimating. Like when you look at you, like you said, you're not really the biggest guy in the ring. But man, the way I saw you throw Aiden Prince around in a couple of those movesets that night in that match was pretty impressive. You did, I believe there was a German suplex spot you guys did. And I think you launched him almost clear to the other side of the ring. So I don't know if you think your power is underwhelming, but you got to give yourself a little bit more credit, dude, because for a small guy, I think you could probably throw me around like a rag doll, and I'm close to 290 pounds.
I think over the years I've definitely, like the last few years, I've definitely tried to incorporate a little more power to my arsenal, like power moves to my moveset there. I think just in size, like a lot of people, when you look at afar, you think I'm the smaller guy, but really I'm a lot taller in stature than a lot of guys that I wrestle with. And I'm not far off in weight. So I've been, sometimes I'm not always consistent in the gym and stuff, but I do try to work on stuff in there when I'm in there, a lot of mobility and lifting and stuff like that could help me with that. But over the years, definitely increasing.
So one of the things I loved about you most of all at Crossbody is how you command an audience. You command an audience with a lot of flair. And Aiden Prince, obviously being the face in that situation, there was no other way for you but to be the heel. And we'll get into the question of a little bit later which you prefer, heel or face. But that night, there's a lot of, in wrestling as we know, I mean, being a fan, you being a fan, heckling and wrestling go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So a lot of the fans are very vocal, especially at Crossbody. It's a small, intimate venue, but they're very vocal, and they're very, very honest with their feelings and their opinions. But you command an audience so well, to the point where I think you had some of those fans kind of cringing as to what you would say back to them, because they were going at you, but you always had you're very quick-witted. You had a comeback. So in terms of that, because like I said, it goes hand in hand. You can't have heckling without wrestling. Does it sometimes get to a point where the heckling goes too far, or does it always just kind of roll off your back?
No, it always rolls off my back. They pay for a ticket, and they're allowed to say whatever they want. And for me, it's a learning tool, and I kind of love those moments that I'm able to test myself. So I totally agree that there's never a point, and usually depending on the venue, not so much at Crossbody, but the people that do it have had a few drinks, so I don't take anything too serious.
That's the truth, yes. A lot of times, not so much Crossbody is an alcohol-free venue, but a lot of other venues, there are liquor mixing that in with adrenaline and a whole lot of testosterone. It's like a recipe for disaster. Has there ever been a situation with a fan where it's gone back and forth so much, or somebody believed it so wholeheartedly, and then they saw you after, or they saw you at another show, and it was like they were like, "Yo, I'm sorry for how I reacted," or they kept carrying it on? Was there ever any instances like that?
Geez. I'd have to think really hard, so I guess the answer is no, because nothing sticks out in my mind. I'm almost 1,000 times out of 10 there's a guy apologizing that he gave me so much shit, because a lot of people, it's funny, I mean, this usually happens in Toronto, say, where they will come to a show, they've never seen me before, they think a lot less of me because I come out and a smaller guy. And then they realize by the end of the match how good I am. And I sorry to sound egotistical in that sense.
No, it's the truth, man. I've been saying it.
It's just like a way that I like to look at things when I go out there and I go into a new place and no one's ever seen me. I just tell myself, like, by the end of the match they'll think differently, and that's how I do all my matches. And so I did that, and then this guy was given, like, typically they give me shit, and then by the end of the match they're changing their mind, and then they come up to me after the show and they say, "Hey, sorry about that. That was a great match." And obviously I'm appreciative of them saying those words, but never do I take them wholeheartedly, and I'm sure they don't mean them when they say them.
That's true. I think it's just the heat of the moment, 100%. In terms of your career, because you've been wrestling, I want to say you've been wrestling, I mean, I've done my research on the internet, but the internet doesn't really tell the whole truth, but it says close to about 15 years now. Am I right in that?
I think I was, before the interview, honestly, I was about to look at the results page just so I know when I started. I don't even know my own anniversary, which is bad, but I don't know what technically, some people say, when they started training is their anniversary, when they had their first training match is their anniversary, when they had their first legitimate match is their anniversary. I couldn't tell you, but yeah, I mean, I started training when I was 15. I remember that. Now I'm 30 years old. So
let's go with 15 years.
So I must be 14 probably pro years.
Yeah, 14 pro years going into your 15th year in 2020. And that's a huge milestone, man. Congratulations, because a lot of guys their careers are cut short, or their careers don't have that much of a shelf life. So for you to be going 15 years strong, that's huge. And that's a credit to who you've been in the ring with, but also a credit to your training, because a lot of people, like we said, they don't realize, like your grandparents, they don't get it, they don't understand it, but every time you step through those ropes, you are putting your life in your opponent's hands and vice versa. And you've got to tell a great story, and you always want to kick it up a notch. You always want to kind of feel the vibe with the crowd, and you want to have those spots where you know you're going to get the biggest pops, whether it be boos or cheers. But every time you step in that ring, you are putting your life on the line, because one slip, one thing, and you could be injured. You could be something worse. And people, and that's why I appreciate everyone that steps in that ring and everyone I interview on this show. I'm always have the utmost respect for, because you guys do something for me as a fan. You give me people to boo and cheer for, and you put on shows that I love. And I'm also a huge wrestling fan. My wife, I have 2 daughters. One is 10, and the other one is 3 going on 4. And our whole family loves wrestling. We don't miss a pay-per-view, even though the WWE product is not the greatest these days. We don't miss a pay-per-view, and any chance I can get to take them out to an indie show, I do. I take my 10-year-old daughter with me. Not so much my 4-year-old, because she's a little crazy right now and she won't sit still for 5 minutes. But my 10-year-old I do, and my wife has also accompanied me to a few shows. And my wife is old school Italian, much like yourself.
That's awesome.
She does. Oh yeah, she's the light of my life. I tell everyone I've ever paid any attention to, she saved my life. Without her, I don't know where I would be today. And she's complete old school Italian. Her grandparents, just like your grandparents, I told them I started a podcast. What's that? That's a radio show. It's kind of like a radio show for the internet. Oh, what do? I interview wrestlers. Why? Why not? That's stupid. It's not stupid. You just don't understand. So my wife's like, it's better you don't talk to my grandparents anymore about what you do on the side, because they don't understand it, nor do they care. So I was like, okay. But in terms of, because back to my original question, I kind of segued there. But see, that's because we're connecting, man. The interview's just flowing. It's like,
absolutely. Like fine wine.
There it is. The Italian fine wine and a good sugo, some meatballs, and some bread.
It.
Buddy, you and I be talking for like 6 hours straight.
That's it. I know.
Well, I'm gonna have to have you come over for dinner one night. She can cook for you. You'll love it.
There you go.
In terms of your career thus far, though, I mean, you've had a lot of matches. You've faced a lot of guys. You've had intergender matches. You've had all kinds of matches that you can think of. Is there a match that stands out to you in your 15 career thus far that you consider to be your best body of work, or one of your best bodies of work if it's hard to narrow a specific one down?
That's a tough one.
That's what I do here on Straight Talk, Alessandro. I ask the tough questions.
I know, man. Jeez. There's so many great people that I've been in the ring with. I guess there's like a two-parter to this. Like, the best match. Oh, jeez. I don't know why. Well, I obviously know why, but like, I think the one that stands out the most is when I wrestled the recently released Brody Lee. I wrestled him back. I can't even remember the year. It was at Alpha One show, but there was just something in the air that night for me, and there was the chemistry we had for not ever talking to each other or meeting before. That match just stands out, and like I was just a big fan of his when he was doing his indie work, and he had just come back from a tour from Japan, and he knew nothing really about me other than the fact that a couple people said I was really good, and he took that as enough to give me a really good, basically, shine in the match and look like $1 million. And when we were planning the match, like, I was kind of like calling what I would like him to do of his own moveset, and he took that as like a very big compliment, and it was just, everything fell into place that night. And I had some very special people in the crowd that usually didn't come to shows, and it was just like everything lined up that night, and it went really well. And I think that's probably one of my favorite matches, just because of all the different elements that came together in one night. Yeah, but I think the other part of it is, if you were to ask me who I have the most chemistry with, I just think I'd be remiss not to say that Scotty O'Shea I have the most chemistry with, and I'm not just saying that because he's my best friend, but because we literally think of the exact same thing at the exact same time all the time when it comes to this business, and it's actually kind of sickening.
You know what? I love your answer, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in doing my research, as I always do to prepare for these interviews, I watched you and Scotty O'Shea in a match. I watched one of the matches that you guys have had, and I also did watch the Brody Lee match because I'm a big fan of Brody Lee. So I was able to find both those matches online, and you couldn't see my reaction, but thank God it's a podcast. If you did, you would have seen my little schoolgirl smile. I'm sitting here in my house, and I'm like, when you said it, I'm like, yeah, he said it. He said that one. That's my favorite one too. He said it. I love that.
Yeah.
So you know what, man? You're right. Both those like the one match I watched with you and Scotty O'Shea was stellar. It was absolutely incredible. I have reached out to him. I'm going to have to press a little harder. I will not give up. I will get him on the show. And but the one with Brody Lee, you were right, man. There was something in the air that night. And from a fan of yours that I've become to appreciate your style and your abilities and the times that I have seen you across body. I can't wait for January, man. You're in that match. I think you're in the Fatal 4-Way with Pretty Ricky and Justin Sane and stuff like that. That's going to be incredible. Like, that match is going to be a barn burner. I can't wait for that one, man. I cannot wait. I don't know who to pick in that one. I just know Pretty Ricky's going to have his hands full. But that Brody Lee match, you're right. That, in my opinion, that is one of your best bodies of work. And I'm happy that you said that because I think that is one of your strongest performances to date. But anytime you and Scotty O'Shea lock up, you're right. And I think it's because, like you said, when you're best friends and you share that chemistry and you think of the same things, it's easy to, and especially when it's your best friend, it's easier to trust them in the ring. Not like you don't trust anybody you work with, but you feel a little bit more comfortable because it's your best friend.
No, for sure. It's almost like he could do anything.
Exactly, and you know that he's going to be there in case something doesn't go right or vice versa. You're going to be there to cover the other one up. So you're still going to make the other one look good, which is huge.
Yeah.
All right. This interview is fantastic. We're having so much fun. We're almost at the tail end of it. Got another 10, 15 minutes in us, I think, for sure. But
no worries.
I got a question for you, and this may be like an off-kilter question, but
sure.
Are you a fan of comic books? Do you read comic books? Have you ever read comic books?
I have never sunk my teeth into a comic book.
All right. Well, let me paint.
I'm not a fan. It's not that I'm not a fan. It's just I'm the type of guy that if I haven't started it, I feel like I'm lost. Like I don't watch series of shows because I feel like I'm 9 series away from the beginning of the show. So
Right.
it's going to take me a while.
Fair enough.
Unless I have the time.
And with comic books, you know what? That's the way it is because there's so many different avenues you could peruse.
Right.
It's hard. It is hard.
Right.
But the reason I asked the comic book question is because I'm a big fan of comic books, and I used to have one series that I absolutely loved. And I haven't pulled this question out in a while, but I feel like you might give me a really cool answer. Now, I will pre-warn you, there's a lot of setup to this question, and it's a tough one. So you got to prepare, okay?
Okay.
All right. So this one of my favorite comic book series of all time was a series called What If. It was done by Marvel, and it was a set of comic books that if certain things hadn't happened, how the world might be different. So, for example, if Peter Parker didn't get bit by the spider to become Spider-Man, if Punisher's family had not been killed, if Wolverine didn't join the X-Men, if Hulk didn't do the gamma ray experience, so forth and so on. And it was, what would the world be like if these things never happened? But I have a different spin on the question, and the spin is, let's pretend that this is, who knows what year it is, it's down the road, it's the near future. You walk down your stairs, or you walk out of your bedroom in your condo, or wherever you live, and you go to your kitchen table, you make yourself a cup of coffee, you cook yourself some bacon and some eggs, some sausage, get the bread flowing. You sit down at your kitchen table, you look out the window to the beautiful sun shining, and you look down at your kitchen table, and in front of you, there are 5 contracts, all for the same amount of money, all for the same amount of commitment dates. But the 5 companies in question are WWE, AEW, Ring of Honor, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Impact Wrestling. And the only reason I mention these 5 in particular, because there's a lot of fantastic promotions out there, but the reason I mention these 5 is because these are the 5 I live and follow religiously. Where would you go? And if you had the opportunity to, right out the gate, who would you want to work a series of matches with or a promo with? Who would you want to face first in that organization? So I did say it was a tough one.
Yeah.
So, but this is just all fun. This is all a what-if scenario. So let's have some fun. Where would you like to go, and who would you like to face in that organization right out the hop?
Yeah, easy for me right now. I think people won't be shocked by my answer, but, I think I'd be remiss to say, everyone always says if you don't want to go to WWE, you're like a liar. You don't want to be a wrestler if you don't want to be in the WWE. And I do believe that. I honestly do. I'd be remiss to say I wouldn't love to go there because that is obviously the dream. But I think if you're saying they're all the same money, you just have your choice. You're living your life right now that you're living. That's the thing for me is where I am in my life. If I did have that opportunity to pick from 5 contracts, I would want it that it suits my schedule, and it's not that I'm on the road 365 days a year with the WWE. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
So I think I would have to go with AEW just because it's a weekly show. You're able to come home on the weekends, enjoy your life, still have a life, but at the same time, being able to be on an international stage. I don't think, I love New Japan, not something I see myself. It's not a place I see myself living. That's somewhere you have to commit to living. So I would say AEW is the biggest one for me. And I think right out of the gate, who I want to wrestle would probably be one of my favorite wrestlers right now, and that's Rey Fenix. I just think he's an incredible talent that is so, we take for granted in independent wrestling. Like, he's a phenom when it comes to just high-flying and lucha libre style. So, that's my answer, AEW and Rey Fenix.
I absolutely love the answer, and I figured you were going to go with AEW, and I love it, but I want to raise you, because I see you facing somebody else better, and I think you two, with your promo skills and his promo skills, and you're both cocky characters in the ring, there's only one other option for me at AEW. Rey Fenix is a great option, but the second one for me, I got to say MJF, brother.
Oh yeah.
You and MJF, I think, would play off so well off each other because you're both very cocky in the ring. And
so I have wrestled him before.
Have you?
We've had decent chemistry, so I don't disagree. But he's definitely come into his own a lot more in the last year with AEW and the launch of AEW. So there's definitely a unturned leaf in that scenario, if you want to say that. But we've crossed paths twice in Hamilton, actually.
I have to look up those matches then. I did not see those, but I got to look them up.
Online. I don't know if they're out online, but you can. You can probably get them on you can probably see them on indie.tv.
I do have a subscription now, thanks to Crossbody Pro Wrestling, so I may have to peruse that. There you go. All right, that's awesome, man. That's great. That's fantastic. I did not know you two had matches. See, now you're making me like a kid in a candy store. I'm gonna have to hang up and go right upstairs and tell the wife, "Forget what you're doing. We're watching wrestling tonight. It has to happen." Yeah. Before I go, one other interesting point you mentioned. You did mention Shawn Michaels as a definite early influence. Were there any other early influences that you had in shaping who you are today as a wrestler?
Yeah, that's there's two guys that have basically is the reason why I wrestled, and it's Shawn Michaels, number one, and number two is Alex Shelley. You may or may not know a lot of his work, but he has done a lot of stuff with TNA back in the day, and just an unbelievable talent that has gotten influences from Japan, Mexico, American influences. He is a absolute wizard when it comes to in-ring, and he's ultimately the number one guy I want to face before I hang up the boots. So he's definitely number two on my list.
All right, Straight Talk, you heard it there first. If anybody knows him, get at him, tweet him, tell him Alessandro da Bruno is waiting. He's waiting in the wings to get his hands on that guy. No, I do not. Yeah. I do not know the name, but I will definitely have to research it for sure.
Oh man.
Sounds like one hell of a talent.
You would love him. You would love him.
I think I would. I mean, considering I love, everybody I talk to, I have, again, the utmost respect for. And this is kind of a fun question, but I think I already know the answer, and I think most of my listeners will when they listen to this one. But heel or face, which do you prefer to play?
Wow. You think they know?
I think they do. I think I know too, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, you might be. I prefer face.
Are you really?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say heel, man, because you play heel like dynamite, bro.
Yeah, no, I do love it. Don't get me wrong. But there is something about, the face aspect and the underdog aspect. I've been told that I am quite the underdog, and I definitely relish in those compliments because I feel like anytime I'm in the ring, I know how to mold a comeback pretty well. So I feel like that for me is my favorite bodies of work. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. My heel stuff is stuff I'm very proud of.
Oh yeah, your heel stuff is legendary, Merler. It's legendary.
Yeah, man. I know.
It is. It's very good. It is very good. Well, that's you blew me away. You shocked the host on my own show.
There you go.
That doesn't happen very often. That does not happen very often. All right. You know what? Let me see. There is one question kind of burning a hole in my pocket. Oh, in terms of your schedule, you did actually mention that I guess you're allowed to pick and choose your dates now. You've got a comfortable foot in the door. Is there any goals for, this interview is going to drop in 2020. This will probably drop end of January, early February. But what are your goals for the upcoming year that you want to set for yourself in terms of maybe schedule, in terms of where we could see you next, and in terms of what you kind of have in store for yourself for the new year?
Yeah, for me, it's just keeping consistent on the independents and just being as busy as possible. Like you said, I pick and choose my dates, which I thoroughly enjoy. I love what I do. I'm busy. I keep busy, and I'm making enough for me to be happy with, and pay the bills here at the house and everything. So it's nice, and it's a good feeling after 14 years, like we said. I should be at that point. So it's very satisfying, but just keeping busy. And my biggest thing for the new year, and I've been talking to all the promoters about it, is something. It's more of a challenge for me. I want to wrestle guys that I've never wrestled before in singles matches. I just find, being in Ontario for most of my career, I find I wrestled similar guys over and over. I want to have singles matches with guys that I've never wrestled before, whether that's new, out of country, whatever it may be. I want those matches even with anyone, just to test myself and where I'm at in my career, so I can still keep up with the younger guys or teach the brand new guys or whatever it may be. That's my biggest goal for 2020.
Well, I cannot wait to see you in 2020 and see you kick ass. And next time I see you at a show, we'll have to snag a picture. And I do want to let you know that you are now officially a member of the Straight Talk family. You have my number. I have yours. Anytime you want to come back on the show, it would be an absolute honor to speak with you again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to seeing you at the next show.
Absolutely. And before I go, this is a fun question. I just thought of it in my head, but I have to ask it now. Your all-time favorite dance track of all time.
Oh man, that's a hard one.
Is that the hardest question I asked today? That can't be.
Yeah, probably. You know what? Probably. There's so many.
Would it help you if I told you mine?
Yeah. No. I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
That probably helps.
This might shock a lot of people, but this is my all-time favorite dance track, man. It's King of My Castle.
Oh wow!
That's my tune, bro. I'm not even gonna lie to you, man.
So good.
I still have the CD single.
Yeah, man. I'm just trying to think of all the way backs now because
King of My Castle. Oh yeah, buddy.
That's solid. Jeez. It's like I'm just thinking it's gotta be what is that song called now? I'm just gonna be stuck on this song now.
You're gonna text me when we hang up and be like, "That's the song."
Exactly.
I got a couple off the top of my head. I could think of Rhythm Is a Dancer, Masquerade. Okay. Remember Masquerade? Gotcha.
No, I remember it, but that's not the one.
Okay.
If you keep naming some, might come to me.
Any Lasgo? See It in Your Eyes.
Oh, Lasgo was solid.
I had the whole album. I think I still do, actually. This
interview has just taken a right turn, and I enjoy every minute of it.
What am I... Oh, Mr. Vane? Call
Mr. That's a solid one.
Mr. Rom. Mr. Vane? No? No?
I feel like there's a song...
Maybe CC Music Factory, a little Gonna Make You Sweat, Pump Up the Jam. Pump up the jam, pump it up.
Why didn't you ask me before so I could be ready?
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. All the Straight Talk fans.
I gotta say, but growing up, like, if we don't go way backs, like, one of my favorite tracks, and it's old enough, it's gotta be, what's it called? Tiesto Traffic. Yes. Like just the sound and the beat, like that's like Tiesto's still one of my favorite DJs, but like that's an oldie and a goodie.
No, you know what, man? You got to do me a special favor. When I see you in January, you got to, for one night only, you got to tell Ben you got to come out to that track. That's got to be your entrance song for once. For one.
That's fine.
So that's gonna happen.
Maybe I'll put it at the beginning.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, you tell Ben.
A little traffic intro.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's it. I got to listen to that. Now I got to download that song after. Well done.
There you go.
All right. Well, there you go. Now I can officially say I can scratch off talking dance music with a wrestler off my bucket list. It's happened.
That's amazing.
It's happened.
It happened.
Oh, man. Alessandro, this interview has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for taking out the time. You go enjoy the rest of your night with your new puppy. He got a new puppy, everybody. Sitting beside him. Was quiet as a mouse. What kind of dog is it?
I did it. It's a half Shih Tzu, half Poodle.
Oh, okay. My daughter was here right now. She just want to come over and pet it all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't have the typical Italian name.
What did you name it?
Sawyer.
Sawyer. Oh, no, that's not a WAP name at all. No.
It's not, but it's such a boss name.
It is, so, Sawyer. I like it. It rolls off the tongue. Yeah. Sawyer.
It's it.
I have a dog at home, too. I have a little tiny dog. She's half Pomeranian, half poodle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she loves everyone else in the house, but she bites me all the time. And,
there you go.
And her name, because we're Disney freaks in this house, so her name is Minnie.
Oh, gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah, right?
I mean, if it's any consolation, my parents have a dog, and she's a Pomchi, and her name is Bella. So, I mean, I couldn't go typical Italian when the dog's name is Bella.
Yeah, no, you couldn't. No, you really couldn't. No, you couldn't top that.
Name my dog Bello?
Yeah. You should have named your dog Mr. Vane. That would have been sick. All right, you take care. Enjoy the rest of your night with your puppy, and it was an absolute honor to speak with you today, sir. Thank you so much for the time.
Okay, no problem, man. Thank you again. All right.
All right, you take care.
You too. Ciao.
Bye. Well, guys, what can I say, man? That was Alessandro de Bruno, an absolute amazing talent. If you have not checked him out, please do. Check out those matches we spoke about. Check out his career. And you can check it all on Independent Wrestling TV. That's right. If you don't have your subscription, you should get it. And you should check out his match with Ada Prince at Crossbody, because if you have not watched it, you should. It is actually one of my favorite matches, next to the one he did with Brody Lee. As always, I am your host. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to tune in next week. You must follow the socials. And you will find out who the next interview is, because I'm never going to tell you. As always, I'm your host. You guys take care, and I will see you all next week. Peace.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week for another episode on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Also follow us on Facebook at Straight Talk Wrestling, on Instagram at Straight Talk Wrestling, and on Twitter at _Straight Talk. And for all our merchandise, you can search us on ProWrestlingTees.com.